Alright, good evening, aviators. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you for tuning in on this week's podcast yet again. I really appreciate those who actually view these and listen to them because it really means a lot to me, being able to share my journey with the entire world. And my goal is to really inspire people and bring people together with the same passions and interests. And to prove that anybody can do anything as long as they put their mind to it. So first off, it has been exactly 2 months since I have become a newly certified private pilot. And a lot of people ask me how that feels, and it feels amazing. I have been longing for this journey. I've been longing for the title of pilot, and here we go. I have it right now. So with that being said, we'll just jump right into this week's topic. So I decided on this week's topic because just based off a lot of questions that I've been asked within the past, since I've started pilot training and doing everything that I need to do to become a pilot. And when people hear what I have to do to become a pilot, they sometimes are not very, they're scared. They're scared when they find out that I've soloed an airplane. They're scared when they found out that I have soloed an airplane for more than 100 nautical miles and landed at 3 different airports. So this week's topic is facing fears. It's hard. Honestly, I'll just admit that it is so hard facing your fears. And I'll tell a quick story, but when I was younger, just a little bit younger than I am now, I was someone who was afraid of a lot of things that range from talking to people to driving a car to just some day-to-day activities where I felt fear. I was like, I don't want to do this. This makes me very, very uncomfortable. But as I've grown older and as I've gotten more into the aviation community and been able to put myself out there and say, hi, you like aviation too? This is great. But what's cool is we all have something in common. And that's the fact that we share this earth that we live on. But I really was able to connect and figure out that, I'm not the only one with these fears, and it's okay. So in aviation, there's a lot of stipulation behind the industry that I think invokes these fears. And rather me say or mention the fact that plane crashes. Planes do crash. Helicopters do crash. Gliders do crash. But unfortunately, the hard reality of it is cars crash too. And I have an unspeakable fear of driving, but I do it anyways. But in the reality, every day you're going to face something challenging. And what matters most is the fact that you get up and do it, because when in doubt, once you do it, that's going to make you a little bit stronger of a human than you were 5 minutes ago. So one of my favorite, all-time favorite aviators of the past who have inspired me through this journey for sure is Amelia Earhart. I have talked about her so many times on these podcasts, but during her time, it was not ideal. It was hated that, women, they weren't supposed to work, right? They weren't supposed to have jobs. So she was hated for, flying and pushing the limits, I guess you could say, reaching fame because she was doing the unspeakable at the time. But she said something amazing, and I really want this quote to circumnavigate the world, just like she nearly did. So she said, use your fear. It can take you to the place where you store your courage. That is a beautiful quote, in my opinion. hands down one of the best in history, and it's one that keeps me going. See, it's been a challenge to take tests and get up in the morning when I don't feel like getting up, because it's hard. It's hard to say, I have a test this week. I have a check ride this week. The hardest thing ever is when you say, I have a check ride this week. I have a check ride tomorrow. And that being 2 months ago, it was crazy to think just how much more confident I've been since overcoming that fear, or that initial tendency to immediately think, oh no, I'm in trouble, I have a test this week. I figured out that the human mind either receives something or rejects something. And it's hard to kind of be able to read yourself in a way that I don't know. It's quite interesting to know the psychology behind this. I personally can't explain it. I mean, yeah, I'm a pilot. I'm not a psychologist. But it's really interesting to see how the brain perceives data. Because in my experiences, in my analyses throughout my life, I've been able to figure out that if I have a test, I'm stressed. If I have to get up in the morning, I'm stressed. It's inevitable. But facing fears is the best thing we can do. I still remember the first time that some of my closest friends found out that I would be soloing an aircraft that weighs a ton. Roughly a ton. They were mortified. Some of them were scared. Some of them were like, what? How are you going to do that? Some of them thought it was cool. The majority of them thought it was cool. But there was always that second nature to say, how are you going to do that? That is scary. I could never do that. But my favorite phrase is, I could never do that. But then again, what does could mean? And then we can get into English and everything, but could is more of like a conditional phrase. Well, what if you can do it? And I used to be the person that thought, well, geez, how am I going to solo an aircraft? I mean, it seemed impossible. It seemed seriously and legitimately impossible. But I did it. I still remember my wheels leaving the ground, and it was just such a huge relief. It was as if I was flying. My body was flying, not the aircraft. It was glorious, indescribable. And it was so much joy and freedom and passion. But then fast forward to check ride. I said, how am I going to pass a check ride? I remember my training. I'm smart. I have the knowledge. But how am I going to pass it? And that's the question, is whenever you find yourself asking, how am I going to do it? The answer is always do it. Because in aviation, if you're in an emergency, there's no second thought. There's no second thought like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can handle this emergency. You just go straight into emergency procedures and execute the appropriate maneuvers to get safely to the ground. And I just like to think of that when it comes to tests and check rides and fears. And the only way to overcome it is to actually do it. And to not be afraid of what's called the inevitable. Because you're going to fail at something. You're going to fail at something at some point. And trust me, I have. My check ride was like perfect. And I couldn't have asked for a better one. But at some point, you're going to have to face it. You're going to have to complete that test. You're going to have to make that challenge happen. Because as a pilot, and I'll share like some experiences, that's what I like to do in these. The day before my check ride was, I wasn't even thinking. I was just doing a flight plan, and that was it, because I had a short notice. But in the long run, going in with confidence, or even half confidence, is great. Because telling your mind that you can do something is going to make it much easier. And I love flying, and I want to share a whole bunch of stories, but the main point I want to come across in this week's podcast is the fact that flying is going to require a lot of fears, and it's going to require you breaking those fears and breaking the stereotypes. You're going to come to points where maybe people don't believe in you. Maybe you're struggling. Maybe you just failed a test. Maybe it feels like the world is falling apart. But in the long run, I've come to the conclusion that in aviation, you have to remember that everything happens for a reason. And you can't give up, because it's gonna get hard. And it does get hard. But I've had some amazing experiences with this industry and with flying. But a lot of people, one question I get asked, will you ever give up? So the definition of giving up for me means quitting something, dropping away from, dropping out, not facing my fears. That's what quitting is. No, nothing will ever get me to quit flying. Nothing will ever get me to quit my dream of becoming a commercial airline pilot. Nothing will ever stop me from eventually getting to where I want to be in the left seat at an airline, preferably Delta. And I want to make the point clear that aviation requires a whole lot of determination. It's not so much smarts, like you need to be smart, but not over the top smart like what a lot of people think. You just need a lot of self-determination and self-discipline, because the nature of it is rigorous. The programs are rigorous. Check rides is considering like maybe a standard high school test. Check rides are hard, but nothing will ever get me to quit aviation. There could be, an issue down the road, but nothing will stop. I will keep going, because there is no way on earth that I could give up my dream for anything. If someone paid me $2 million to give it up, I still wouldn't. But there's just so much passion and so much love for this industry that I have. And I have thoroughly enjoyed sharing my journey with all of you, because I've seen a lot more people become interested in aviation. I've had so many people reach out to me regarding questions about aviation, about my flight program. I've had so many people thank me for what I'm doing, but all of this means so much to me. And you guys are what keeps me going sometimes. Sometimes it does feel like I'm overwhelmed and just life is crushing down on the world and it's impossible. But in the long run, I know that anybody can do anything they put their minds to, as long as they're determined and they're willing to put forth the work. So another question I wanted to answer in this, because it kind of goes along with the theme, is how do you overcome your fears? So something that I really, really, really love to do is probably just talking myself through it. and saying, okay, so this is the plan. Tomorrow, I'm going to get up, gather my things, go to the airport. I'm going to give myself 30 minutes to study just before the check ride. And then I'm going to walk into the check ride, have all my documents laid out. It's going to be okay. And by minimizing and maximizing time, you'll be able to be a lot more successful, especially in aviation. But just in general, how do I overcome my fears is by just doing it. If I have a fear of driving, I drive. Because you're never going to be able to avoid something forever. And that's something that my younger self didn't quite understand. But now that I'm a lot older, I'm able to see that, nope, at some point I would have to face driving. At some point I would have to face a check ride. At some point I would have to take a college test. At some point I'd have to clean my entire house by myself. Or just something small like that. You're not going to be able to avoid everything. And as someone who is in college, I can definitely attest to a lot of these things. I've grown a lot. And I've grown because I faced my fears. And it seems scary at the time. It's apparent that don't want to do it. You don't really want to get up to do that. But looking back on everything, it's worth it. And you grow, you learn, you find out more about who you are as a person. And I find that just amazing. So, in the long run, face them. Because the minute you face your fears, there's going to be a lot less of them, and it's going to get a lot more manageable. So, one last question that I've been asked numerous times is, how do I get over the fear of flying? That's a tough one, because I was never scared of flying, so I personally I don't really have much sympathy. I don't understand what it's like to have a fear of flight. But I feel as if the fear of flight is accompanied by several other fears, mainly, fear of altitude, of height, being at a high altitude above land, water, worried that the plane would collapse or break apart. But there's a lot of physics that goes into airplanes. There's a lot of complex design systems. There's a lot of backup systems, to be honest. And really, flying is one of the most safe things that anyone could probably do. Pilots are trained to be safe. Pilots are trained for emergency procedures. And pilots understand and comprehend how flight systems work. And lift is an awesome force of flight that helps the aircraft fly. But to be honest, you're not just gonna fall out of the sky. The plane is not just gonna break apart. Turbulence is relatively harmless. Honestly, I've never heard of a case where turbulence has been horribly bad. At least from my personal experiences. But flying is pretty safe. I don't really have any relative tips on how to overcome the fear of flight, again, because I love flying and I don't have a fear of it. I face flying every day. I'm around planes, around helicopters. But anyways, I hope you all are having a great week. Happy June. We're almost halfway done with June, which is pretty crazy. And I'm pretty excited because I have a fun little surprise coming up for, I believe it's set for the 4th of July. So please be watching for that. We're going to do a little something special for July because July is an important month, and I believe that July needs to be celebrated for a few reasons, and we will talk about those when July comes around. But yeah, so podcasts are still up and running every Sunday, and blog posts are also still up and running every Friday. I will try to keep posts consistent, and I will try to send out a new newsletter this week. But I've just been quite busy, but it's been fun. So please, in the comments section, comment your fear and how you've been able to overcome it. I'm pretty curious to see what you guys have to say. But please follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Those are my main platforms. I'm also on TikTok. I rarely ever post on TikTok. But thank you for tuning in on this week's podcast, and I hope you guys have a great week. I will see you guys next week.